Philadelphia, 1948. A city humming with rhythm, resilience, and rebirth. Trolley bells rang down Market Street. Factory whistles blew along the Delaware, and the smell of steel smoke and fresh bread filled the air. The war was over. Soldiers were coming home. Home to shipyard shifts, crowded row homes, and football on the radio. You could hear the heartbeat of the city in the music. The warm brass of Louis Armstrong, the velvet voice of Billie Holiday, the genius of Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker. Sounds that drifted from basement clubs on South Street to late-night radio shows that played long after curfew. Philadelphia's own John Coltrane was just a teenager then, learning to bend notes into emotion, dreaming of something bigger. On movie scenes, heroes like Bogart and Ingrid Bergman filled theaters in Casablanca and the Maltese Falcon. Couples slow danced to In the Mood and Take a Train in blue skies and smoky lounges. It was a time of style and struggle, the birth of modern America, and the soundtrack of a generation that had survived a war. Gas was 18 cents a gallon, bread 12. And though the Phillies were still chasing relevance, the Eagles, those rugged, mud-soaked men in green and silver, they were bringing hope to a working-class city that understood what it meant to fight for everything. This was a Philadelphia built on soul and sweat, jazz and steel, on second chances and small victories. And by the decade's end, it would rise higher than ever before, only to be forgotten by time. This is the story of the back-to-back world champion Philadelphia Eagles. Every great story begins somewhere humble. Alfred Greasy Neale was born in Parkersburg, West Virginia, a small-town athlete who became one of football's greats. He's a forgotten mind. His nickname, Greasy, came from the way he slipped past defenders, elusive, unpredictable, impossible to catch. That same agility followed him into coaching. Before football glory, he was a two-sport star. He played Major League Baseball for the Cincinnati Reds, batting .357 in the 1919 World Series, the infamous Black Sox Series. And he even played in the Rose Bowl before World War I. To this day, he's the only person in history to win a World Series, play in a Rose Bowl, win 2 NFL championships, and be inducted into both the College and Pro Football Hall of Fame. Neale's mind changed the game. When he took over in Philadelphia, the Eagles were little more than a struggling franchise. By 1948 and 1949, they were unstoppable, going 11-1, still the highest winning percentage in team history to this day. His system was disciplined, but daring, built on defense, precision, and teamwork. Under Neale, the Eagles became a reflection of their city. Tough, resourceful, determined. He finished his Eagles career 66-44-5, a record that still commands respect. When he passed away in Florida in 1973, most of the world had already forgotten. But for those who knew the game, and for those of us from West Virginia, Greasy Neale reminds us from something more than a coach. He was proof that genius can come from anywhere, even the quiet hills of home.
They say speed kills, and after you miss the initial tackle, Gerard Page, the last standing free safety, doesn't stand a chance against the speed and quickness of Deshaun Jackson.
Every dynasty needs its heartbeat, its unstoppable force. For the 1940s Philadelphia Eagles, that was Steve Van Buren, a boy from La Ceiba, Honduras, who came to the United States chasing a dream and left a legacy that would echo for generations. Van Buren arrived at LSU, but even there his talent was underused. Scouts saw a man with speed, power, and vision, a player capable of carrying entire offenses. Yet his carries were limited, his potential restrained. Still, he refused to be small, refused to be invisible. Drafted by the Eagles in 1944, Van Buren quickly proved himself a phenomenon. He wasn't just a runner, he was a threat in every phase of the game. In his rookie season, he played defensive back, intercepting 5 passes while also terrorizing defenses as a rusher. He returned kicks with a blend of courage and instinct that left fans breathless. Van Buren's impact on the Eagles championships were immeasurable. In 1948, he rushed for 1,146 yards in just 12 games, scoring 10 touchdowns, carving lanes through defenders like a man possessed. He ran through snow, ice, and mud, and still found daylight. In 1949, the championship, he was the unstoppable force at the heart of the team that would go 11-1, the best single-season mark in Eagle history. Some of his most legendary performances came in the game that defined the era. A 90-yard dash against the Giants, a 2-touchdown performance against the Redskins in the blizzard conditions, and multiple 100-yard back-to-back contests, a testament to consistency, toughness, and vision few have ever matched. Van Buren finished his career as the Eagles' all-time leading rusher, a record that stood for years, and yet he did it in a league where recognition was often tied to media markets, not merit. Being an immigrant and a man of color in mid-century America meant he faced challenges, whispers of prejudice, limits on exposure, and a world slow to see him for the superstar he truly was. But Van Buren refused to be held back. On the field, he was poetry in motion. Off the field, a humble man who let his feet, not his words, speak. For Philadelphia, he wasn't just a player. He was a symbol of excellence, determination, resilience. Every touchdown, every yard, every championship, his story became the Eagle story forever. Steve Van Buren, the first true superstar of the franchise, a man whose name deserved to be spoken wherever Philadelphia football is remembered.
Van Buren always delivered.
Ladies and gentlemen, 15, Steve Van Buren. They say speed kills, and after you miss the initial tackle, Gerard Page, the last standing free safety, doesn't stand a chance against the speed and quickness of Deshaun Jackson.
They called it the golden age of Philadelphia football. But golden ages are fragile things, and memories fade faster than mud dries. The Eagles of the late 1940s were built on more than just flash. Behind Tommy Thompson's steady arm and Steve Van Buren's bruising runs stood a wall of defenders whose names history never learned to say. Men like Norm Wildman Willett, Russ Kraft, and Bucko Kilroy. He fought in the trenches before tackles were tallied or sacks were even written down. They were champions in an era that didn't know yet how to measure greatness. In 1948, the city was buried under a blizzard. The championship game against the Chicago Cardinals was played in a whiteout so fierce that the lines disappeared. Players shoveled the field just to keep the game alive. And in that chaos, Steve Van Buren, already a legend, barreled through the snow for the only touchdown of the day. Eagles 7, Cardinals 0, Philadelphia's first NFL title. A year later, in 1949, the challenge grew. A torrential downpour, and Los Angeles turned the field to a swamp. But again, the defense refused to yield. The mighty Rams, with their high-powered offense, were shut out completely. Van Buren scored twice, and the Eagles claimed their second straight title, the last team to ever repeat before the television era changed football forever. 2 championships, 2 shutouts, the only back-to-back defensive masterpieces in NFL history. And yet, when the cameras finally arrived, the champions of Philadelphia were already growing old, their stats incomplete, their legacies unrecorded, their names left behind in the storm. They were the best team in football, and somehow the world forgot. For a moment, Philadelphia stood on top of the world. Back-to-back champions, 2 shutouts, a dynasty built on toughness, intelligence, and heart. But history has a way of moving on, and in the blink of an eye, the lights of the new NFL left them behind. By 1950, the league was changing. Television cameras were rolling for the first time, bringing football into living rooms all across America. But only a few teams, the glamour teams, the big markets. The networks favored them. They made it on there, and the Eagles champions of a forgotten era, vanished from the national picture. The roster had conquered the mud, the snow, but at this point they were getting old. Steve Van Buren's knees gave out. Tommy Thompson's arm began to fade. The great defense, men like Willie, Kilroy, and Kraft, they scattered into retirement or traded. And when the 1950 draft came, the Eagles, picking last, chose a college basketball player who never played a down of football. The tides were turning. The new decade brought expansion, new teams, new stars, and a new kind of game. The Browns were kings now, led by Otto Graham and Paul Brown's precision offense. The Giants had television exposure and media money. The Eagles, once the class of the league, whooping the Giants 45-0 on their way to the championship, were yesterday's news. From 1949 to 1951, the same team that had once been unbeatable fell to the middle of the pack. Fans who once packed Shaw Park now read about other teams on the front page. It wasn't just the end of an era, it was as if the game itself had passed them by. But legacies have a way of waiting. The spirit of those men, the champions who fought through blizzards and rain, they never really left Philadelphia. And one day, more than a decade later, that spirit would rise again. Against the greatest coach the game would ever know. Against Vince Lombardi himself. But I guess that's a story for another time. This is why I'm making this series. I have to bring light to the legends that history left behind. I have to tell you the stories that deserve to be told. If you believe in that, if you love this team, this city, and the people who made it great, then stick around, like, subscribe, and join me for the next chapter when we revisit one of the most incredible games ever played, the day Philadelphia beat Vince Lombardi.